recording anyway. There we go. There we go. You should see the calendar now over here. Yeah, so everything's off by like a day. So we were supposed to do the beginnings of that's the beginning of chapter B on Wednesday. We started that on Friday. So everything's shifted. So today we're covering 24 to 28 here, and I'm just shifting everything off. And you notice here we have 2 review days built in, the 2nd and the 5th. So we're just everything's gonna shift to the 2nd. We still have a full review day built in on the 5th. Now your homework shifts too, so that means that your last homework is due on the 5th. So we'll go over it then and make sure everybody's clear. And it was just the one exercise. So we can go over that and use that partially to help us review. And then the actual exam happens on the 7th. And assuming we're still in person, it'll happen in person. And for those of you who are stuck online for various reasons, I'll figure something out. Yeah, so just shift everything down. I'm not going to change this calendar right now. I might eventually later. But then once we get caught up to exam 1, catching up on the 9th, we're back on schedule on this. So we start with chapter D after exam 1. So don't be too surprised by that. Okay. Everybody good? Questions, concerns? Okay. Hopefully, don't forget about the YouTube videos too. I keep posting those. I'm just going to keep throwing those in there. As we get closer to the exam, if there was a concept you didn't really grasp or there's problems you're having, obviously feel free to meet with me. I'm available to do Zooms one-on-one if you want to and catch up on ideas. It's basically my office hours. The best way to do it is to schedule it. So just email me or write me and we'll figure it out. But you can also go back and look at those videos. So, and if you watch them on YouTube, you can also click on captions. The captioning is pretty good. I was watching it. It catches most of what I'm saying. So if you don't understand something that I'm saying, you can read it. So check those out. And if you don't find what you're looking for, just mainly ask me. Somebody's in the chat. Okay, thanks, Amelia. I'll probably just leave it alone. It's not a big deal. Yeah, I see what you got there. We'll talk later. All right. Okay. So let's catch up in the rhythm chapter then. And let's see. Yeah. I think we need computer sound, but in case. All right. So we stopped last time. This is always so hard to do. Talking about. Yeah, we finished up with some tempo markings, talking about metronome markings and those kinds of things. And we sort of, the last page we were on here is the beginning of today, talking about simple meters and compound meters. And hopefully, when it says this stuff to do this in the book, actually do this, right? Take a second. I mean, yes, it's really simple. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. Yeah, you're thinking you're like a little kid, but now you're thinking about it in different ways. You're thinking about these, this point of how things are divided, right? And then things like row, row, row your boat. So that's dividing everything into divisions of 2. Like Mary had a little lamb, can't tell where he says, row, row, row your boat, row, row, row your boat. That's a compound meter. We're dividing each. You can feel it. You can kind of feel that division of 3. And so things you already know. Simple kid songs and things like this can be really useful to start thinking about the more advanced concepts that we're talking about here. So actually do this when the book says do it. Take a second and do it, either out loud or at least in your head. So meters with a duple division, in other words, dividing each beat by 2 are called simple, and meters with a triple division are called compound. And we're going to have a lot of terms like this right now, so make sure and keep these straight. So when we're talking about simple and compound, we're talking about how we're dividing each beat, whether dividing in 2, simple, or compound. We divide each beat into 3. So remember that because we're going to be getting into that, what that means in terms of actual time signatures. So all this is pretty straight ahead. So a measure, we've got a unit, a complete metric units, and then is a measure, and we divide those by measure lines or bar lines. And then we have The book uses this term meter signatures, which I don't run across otherwise a whole lot. Honestly, most of the time you're going to hear these as called time signatures. The book likes to call them meter signatures sometimes, which makes sense because they are shown as meter. But realistically, most of you probably come more across the term time signatures in the past. And if we're looking at an actual piece of notation about this, we are talking about all this information. You know, when you've got a piece of music, you've got a whole lot of information up front, which is, you know, it sort of sets the parameters. That's a crappy one. I'll do better than that. It sort of sets the parameters for what we're going to deal with notation-wise if we're looking at a piece of music. So go look at, you know, a piece of music of your own and kind of think about this. We've got the clef, which shows us where the notes are. And this is always the same order. In fact, I have to find a real piece of music to do this. I don't have one close by, I don't think. And I just forgot suddenly, if I should know this. If somebody tell me, does the time signature come next or does the key signature come next? And suddenly my brain will not go there. I think it's key signature, right? Does anybody get a good piece of music in front of them somewhere? I don't have any with the key signature.
It's the key and then the time signature.
Thank you. That's what I thought. I just suddenly, yeah. So let's say we're in the key of B flat major. There's a nice band key. So we have the key signature, right? And so in some ways it kind of shows a little bit of like what the preference is in Western European music and notation is that we've got the notes first, all the note information, right? The clef and the key signature, and then the time signature. But this is always going to be the case. You're always going to see it this way, right? And it tells us a whole ton of information right up front. And then this also shows us then how to divide each measure. And so what we know when we see 4/4 is we're going to have, before we have a bar line, we're going to have 4 quarter notes worth of information. So it could be this, you know, it could be this, whatever. And then, you know, more, we could do more from there. So we've always got 4 beats. They're always going across. And then we have a bar line. We have a measure line or a bar line that breaks those up. And they should be careful when you're drawing these. Just, you know, I wasn't very careful there, but just straight up and down and from top line to top line. Don't go above and beyond. Sometimes if I'm sort of breaking up, I'm not in a time signature, and I want to break up some different ideas, I've got some notes and some things, I might do this and then break up some other things. This is not, for me, this is not a measure line. This is just to show there's sort of a break in the page and then I go on to something else. A true measure, a bar line truly is just that. So some nitpicky stuff, but it matters. Again, the whole point of writing notation like this is to be, clear, so that people can read the music you write and actually play the right thing, you know, or sing the right thing. So, yeah. Let's go back to this. All right. The other thing, and this is why that simple and compound matters so much, is the meaning of those numbers like 4/4 and those things changes depending on if we're talking about simple or compound. So you really have to know which one you're dealing with. And even sometimes you have to use context clues to figure out which one you're dealing with based on a piece of music you're looking at, which we'll talk about in a second. So most things you've played and sung tend to fall in one of these, you know, a ton of stuff tends to be 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4. And by convention, 4 means quarter note, and it's kind of connected to this idea, quarter is 1/4, right? You gotta go upstairs, okay? Go ask mommy, I'm teaching right now. By convention, 4 means quarter note. Well, it's, think about dividing down to a quarter, a fourth of something. That's where it's almost like a fraction. In fact, the book doesn't say this, but you really could have something like, and you won't see it very often, but it is possible to have like 4/1 as a time signature. And the 1, so think about the numbers that we're dealing with. The 1 implies that, this is going to look really weird, but this would have 4 whole notes in a measure before we go on to 4 more whole notes. Kind of nuts, but it's possible. And then, you know, this keeps going up. So 4/2 again, thinking about this like basically like a fraction, 4/2 would have 4 half notes per bar, like that. And then of course 4/4. And if this is the way, this is kind of how you think about it, these fractional systems, and we just fill these in because now they're 4 quarter notes, and this is the one we're most used to. So you change that lower number in a simple meter like this, and you're changing what gets the beat. So 1 equals whole note, 2 equals half note. You can't have a 3, that's impossible. 4 equals a quarter note. 8 equals an eighth note. Getting 1 beat, so you can't have 4/8 as well. And you would basically have, 4 of these guys like that. Okay? Make sense? Man, I'm just determined to hit that key today. All right. So let's see. Now I highlighted this because this kind of like lays it all out. And we will use these terms. We'll come back to these. So these aren't just throwaway terms. These are pretty important. Any meter with 2 beats, all those ones I just showed you, and they can have different with 2 beats. So this is the top number. So 2, 4, 2, 2, 2, 8 is called duple meter, right? Make sure and keep separate the idea in your mind of simple and duple, right? Because simple means the division of the beat is within 2. Duple means there's actually 2 beats per measure. Just keep those separate because those can get kind of confusing. So duple meter, 2 beats per measure, simple meter. And you can have one that's simple meter means it's each beat's divided by 2. You can have one that's both. You can have duple simple, right? That would mean, in fact, duple simple would be 2/4 would be a great example of duple simple. In fact, all of these are. These are all duple simple because we divide each beat by 2, and there are 2 beats per measure. So that would be duple for the measure part and simple for the division part. But they're different concepts. Basically top number, bottom number. Meters with 3 beats are called triple. So anything with a 3 at the top, 3/4, 3/2, 3/8 are triple meters. And meters with 4 beats, 4/4, 4/2, 4/8, quadruple meters. So it makes sense, right? Duple, triple, quadruple. It's all about that top number. And then these 2 special cases, because they're so common, and they show up in so many different pieces of music, they've just become the standard. Sometimes the symbol C will be used for common time, which is 4/4, or this C with the slash through it for cut time, which is 2/2. In the state of Wisconsin here with all the polkas, that's what polkas are in. They're in 2/2. In fact, nice little side story. Polka, I didn't discover this till started dating my wife years ago. Pol in like Slavic languages, Slovak, Polish, Czech, means half. Polka doesn't mean anything about like Polish. It actually means half. It means half time, cut time, literally. So polka. And ka is just a little thing they put on the end of stuff to make it sound cute. So polka just means literally it's like a halftime dance. How about that? There you go. Okay, so I think we're good there. Any questions or anything? Now that you're thinking too much about polka. It's good brat weather. All right, so that one's pretty simple. Literally simple meters are kind of on the simple side. Compound meters get a lot more complex. And do not confuse those 2 words. It really is compound meter, not complex meter. I see some people sometimes getting that confused. Compound meters mean that we've got this, they're always going to have a 6, 9, or 12 in the upper note of the time signature. And basically what they mean is that we divide, we don't give the bottom number 1 beat. We end up adding, it's a compound sort of a beat that happens. So in layman's terms, really simply, the bottom number is now the beat division, not the actual beat itself. So in 4/4, the 4 shows us that the quarter note gets the beat. The bottom number in compound meter, like 6/8, 9/8, 12/8, shows us that the 8th note is the division of the beat. But the way that we group them is actually in 3. So in 6/8, and I'll let me show this. It'll be easier to show on show on here. So in 6/8, we even see this, and we don't write it like this. We don't write 6 eighth notes out before we write 6 more eighth notes in the next bar. We beam them together in such a way to show, unless this is really slow, and the book points this out. If this is marked largo, if this is really, really slow, this is where it's situational. You might have where one eighth note gets the beat. You really would count this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 before you go on to the next measure. But if you don't have any tempo marking and you don't know any better, or if it's marked fast, you assume that this is compound meter. So if it's acting really slow, it's kind of acting not as compound meter, but if it's acting at a normal speed, it acts as compound meter. And so the reason that we beam these together this way is to show that now this dotted quarter note is getting the beat. That 8 doesn't tell us anything about a dotted quarter note getting a beat. That 8th implies some kind of, implies an 8th note. But the 8th note is the division of the beat. It's subdivided down to 3 eighth notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a lot of times, in fact, if we count this, I'm sure different people have had different systems in the past. This is how I like to count things like this. If we had, so 1 and a, 2 and a, whereas something like 4, 4, we just number the beats, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can subdivide down to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that. But we need an extra syllable to come up with if we're going to sort of say these rhythms. And notice again, even though I've got a 6 in the top number here, an 8 here, I still only really have what I think of as 2 beats per measure. In fact, this was on your pre-test for this class, and a lot of people, when I asked them about 12/8, said that it has 12 beats per measure. That's not really correct. It really has 4 beats per measure. 6/8 really has just 2 beats per measure, and we divide each of those beats by 3, right? But the actual downbeats that we expect, there's only 2 of them in 6/8. It's compound meter. That's why compound meter is a little more complex. We've taken these big numbers and compounded them into smaller numbers. So yeah, 12/8 is a really good example of where this gets really complex. In fact, 4/4 kind of matches up its compound equivalent that's not simple is 12/8. So if I was going to put 4 dotted quarter notes per bar, I would count those 1, 2, 3, 4, just like the 4/4, except I feel it as each one's subdivided by 3. 1 and 2 and or if it was really slow, it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on up to 12. Okay, but we assume probably it's 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a, and that's how we deal with 12/8. Is this making sense? Yeah, no? Okay, all right. Let's keep going then. I think that's it. I think we've covered what it talks about here. So these, again, kind of learning these grids as they're marked here in the book are really helpful. Eventually, you'll just be able to recall this. There's some weird looking ones, you're probably not used to seeing like 3/2 a whole lot. And there's some, you start to understand why certain time signatures are more popular than others. So like look at 2/8. In one bar, you've only got 2 eighth notes. And if you beam them together, it looks fast. Now remember, there's no tempo marked here. We don't know if any of these are fast or slow. That's up to the tempo marking. But there's something about 2/8, especially when you start dividing it into 16th notes, divide each beat in half, that you end up, it looks fast, right? There's a lot of information there. It looks like it's going fast. Now that could be really slow. If the tempo's marked slow enough, it doesn't matter. But there are some visual cues. There's also some problems built into some of the stuff that has a 2 at the bottom. Look at 3/2. It's really clear when we only have the actual downbeats, 1, 2, 3, that the half note. But each of those divides into quarter notes. And this bar is kind of visually confusing. I can't really tell if maybe that's one, those three are grouped together and those three are grouped together, or this one's grouped with this one, and which is really what it is, 1 and 2 and 3 and. But there's nothing to show that. Whereas 3, 4, which is much more common, yeah, we got 3 quarter notes, but even better in the divisions, we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and. We've got a real clear division of where the 3 beats are. In fact, compare that to 3/8. It's even better than 3/8 because look at the beaming on 3/8. It's just one big mass of 16th notes beamed together. Whereas in here we've got 3/8 and the 8th notes are beamed together. So we can see the division of 3 beats really clearly. That's why 3/4 is by far the most popular of these simple triple time signatures, right? That's why we see more 3/4 than anything else. And we're going to talk about that too. If you're writing a melody, which one should you use? Well, you're going to keep this stuff in mind. And then same thing here with 4/2. Look at that big mass of quarter notes. It's kind of hard to deal with. Whereas 4/4, nice and evenly divided. 4/8's pretty useful, especially if we want to like have more notes beamed together like this for beats 1 and 3, then that's cool. That works pretty well. Although I think that's a little confusing to look at. But you can see why the 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4 are probably the most popular ones. Compound meters, same thing kind of happens. 6/8, 9/8, 12/8 tend to be the most popular. And again, you can kind of see why, I think, because in the division of the beat, 1 and 2 and is really clear here. Kind of in 16 too, but that's a lot of extra black on the page. There's a lot of ink spilled to get all those extra flags and stuff in. 6/4 though, look again. In fact, I want to point this out. Everybody look at 6/4. All right, look at 6/4 for a second. And then go back up here and look at 3/2. See the problem? Look at the division. 1 and 2 and 3 and, whereas 6/4 is 1 and 2 and, but they look exactly the same. There's just 6 quarter notes per bar. And in fact, composers will use this sometimes to go back and forth. We'll talk about it later. To kind of go back and forth between 3/2 and 6/4 in terms of the way we feel something, because they look similar. They look the same, except the one is simple and one is compound. Yeah. 9/8. Another good one here. And that's kind of the ones to memorize is, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 6/8, 9/8, 12/8. If you get those memorized, I think then you can go the other direction on any of these and kind of understand, okay, my example of compound quadruple is 12/8. So I could figure out 12/16 pretty easily if I understand 12/8. Okay. Now, has anybody come across music that doesn't divide up like 12/8 or 6/8 or 9/8 or something like this? Has anybody ever played or sung anything that didn't divide it this way? No? You can, and not to confuse you too much, but we'll talk about later. You can actually, if you think about the numbers here, you could do something like, well, think about 6 is an easy number. Instead of going 3 plus 3, you could go 2 plus 2 plus 2, couldn't you? Right? 1 and 2 and 3 and this is 1 and 2 and. So we're going to talk about that later too, as to how we might play with these things. Different styles of music from around the world do really interesting things with numbers. And of course, we haven't gotten into like odd numbers like 11 and stuff yet either, but it is possible. Okay, so we also, and I've already been kind of implying it here, we have weak beats and strong beats, so metric accents, all the way back to really the beginning of the chapter. And we use these little symbols when you need to mark strong and weak beats. So long is the strong beat, and this sort of U-shaped thing is for a weak beat. And depending on what meter we're in, we're going to have different strong and weak beats. And so if you think through the meters you've come across and the ones we just talked about, you can probably go through and figure out which ones are strong and weak. There are also sort of secondary weak beats that happen. So in 4/4, we have a, 2/4 is like a classic march kind of a thing. 1 2 1 2 left right. Like it really is connected to marching and that kind of thing. 4/4 is a little more nuanced. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, but the 3 is weaker than the 1. The 1 is always the strongest of the strong beats. And then we sort of have a secondary strong beat on beat 3. And then 3/4 and triple meters, we only have one strong beat, and it's 1. It's the first beat. And so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like a waltz, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, moving along. And 2 and 3 are always metrically weak. Yeah. These same, and this is worth pointing out, these same strong weak relationships also apply to the beat divisions. So if we have simple meter where everything's divided into 2, the ands of the beats are weak, which kind of makes sense. 1, so if we're back up to 4/4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So the downbeat of 2 is stronger than the upbeat of 2, but the downbeat of 2 is weaker than the downbeat of 1, right? There's sort of a hierarchical relationship here, what's strong and what's weak. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Now, if it's compound, that gets a little bit different, right? Compound meters, we get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and if we're like in 12/8. So that means, yeah, beat 2 itself is weaker than beat 1, but the and is kind of like this triple division kind of thing. The and of each beat is weaker than the actual downbeat. So just keep that in mind, that goes all the way down to the beat divisions. Yeah, and terms you probably already knew because of that, downbeats and upbeats. So downbeats are the actual numbers, and the upbeats are the ands or the uhs or the whatever. Those are the, actually, yeah, it can be in compound, the uhs as well. So 1 and 2 and the ands are the upbeats. And then if you sing something like, if you Happy Birthday and Star Spangled Banner are both good examples of, these are triple meters that actually begin on an upbeat. Upbeats are also right. Upbeats are also called the last beat of the measure. So there's a couple of terms that these get used both that way. So in 3, and the Star Spangled Banner's in 3. Oh, say, can you see? So bum, ba, bum. So we hear that actually starts on an upbeat. So it's 1, 2, and 3, a 1. 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And so it starts on a beat. And sometimes you'll see these terms pop up. Anacrusis. So it means in part of a melody or a melody that begins on an upbeat like that. So we call it a pickup note sometimes too, or a pickup beat. But an anacrusis melody, that's the actual anacrusis, is the official term of a pickup, if you've heard it called that. So yeah, downbeats and upbeats. And that actually takes us through, I think, where we need to be for today. Yeah, it does. So before I go on, are there any questions about any of that stuff? Nothing? All right, so get out your workbooks, and we'll work on the homework a little bit together. You can get ahead of it. Get ready for Wednesday then. Hang on just a second. I'll get this open. And let's see. Your homework for Wednesday is what? 3 through 5? Yeah. What originally was due today? Due Wednesday, 3 through 5. First of all, did anybody have any problems with 1 and 2? The stuff that was due today? No?
I was pretty confused on exercise 2.
Okay, let's look at that first before we get into 3 through 5. Good. Do you want to? I don't know who's talking. I don't know who that was.
Maribel, it was me.
Okay, hi Maribel. Do you have one? Do you want to look at one in particular, or is it more about how to do it?
It's how to do it, and what was it kind of asking for?
Okay, so it's asking for one note that it equates to whatever multiple notes they've given you, right? So you've got to figure out, you've got to add up. There's a few ways to do it. If you're just thinking fractionally, you've got to sort of think about how would these fractions add up to some bigger number. But you could also give these numbers if you wanted. Now that, especially after today's talk, we've talked about specific time signatures. You can imagine these being in a time signature and how you might notate them that way. There's a couple ways to go about this. But what you've got to start doing is thinking about that hierarchy, wherever that is in the book, where it sort of shows that one thing divides to another. So let me write a couple of these down. Leave all this up here. Oh, wow. Bashed my little keyboard here. I'm going to write a couple of these down and then go back to this screen and we can talk about how to do this. So let me pick just a couple here. So it's kind of thinking in fractions, which, you know, for different people, fractions are kind of were not your favorite thing in math either. So it's probably not too surprising if, you know, they cause you trouble there, they're going to cause you trouble here. Again, a lot of musicians didn't get into music because they're great at math. Let's see. All right, so I'm just picked a couple here at random to talk through how we're doing. So you've got to make one note that's equivalent to all these notes right here, right? So you can kind of start going down and adding is, you know, think about how they add together to create bigger notes. And so 2/8 notes equals 1/4 note. So you can take this to the quarter note and say, all right, all of these eighth notes equivalent could be, and it's basically what I'm basically doing here is I'm sort of tying together, right? I'm tying together all of those notes. Does that make sense? All right. Excuse me. So I've got it down to 4/4 notes, but I need to get all of this turned into one note. So then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to keep tying these together. So 2/4 notes equals a half note. So each of those is a half note. And then I'm going to tie those together, and 2 half notes equals a whole note. So I've had to take it down from fraction to fraction. So half to a quarter to, you know, eighth to a quarter to a half to a whole. So the answer for that one is a whole note. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're just trying to figure out. Now, some things it gets a little more difficult. So this one down here, this example, 3/16 notes. Well, it's not evenly divided. If I tried to do what I just did, I'll put it up here, it'll be easier to see. So 3/16 notes. It's going to be hard to see it if I do like, well, okay, I can tie these two together, but then I've got an extra one left over, but that's okay, we can do this. So wait, that's not right. So if I tie 2/8 notes, so these are 16ths, and it's hard to see. Tie 2 16ths together, I get an 1/8, and then I've got a 16th left over, right? So that doesn't get the job done, and there's no way to do what I did over here. There's no way to go further than that. So how can I fix this? What do I need to use? What do you think? Anybody?
Make it a dotted note?
Yeah, a dot, because remember that a dot halves whatever it's dotting. And so if I need half of an 1/8 note, I need a 16th note, then I can do that. And that's the correct answer then. So that's the equivalent of tying all three of these together. And that's the answer. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So let's go back and look. Good. Any other questions about today's stuff? All right, well, let's look at about 12 minutes here. Let's look at 3 through 5. So in exercise 3, show by means of undotted tied notes. So this is actually going the opposite way. So this is the reverse of what we just did. As few as possible in each case by undotted tied notes. as few as possible. So we're not going as far as this is going to go, but we're showing that we understand where the dots are, the value of each dotted or doubly dotted note. So we're going to show ties. So let's take we'll do the last one together. It's a double dotted, what an ugly note, a double dotted 16th note. So let's go back to this. So we got a double dotted 16th note here, and we've got to show this as if it was a few different tied notes. So it's asking us this first thing we'll do is just take out the actual 16th note itself. So there's the 16th note. And then we've got to figure out what each of the dots stands for. So remember, the first dot always stands for half of the value of whatever we're looking at. So what's half the value of a 16th note?
32nd note.
32nd note, right? So I'm going to tie this. I'm going to give myself plenty of stem there because I need three flags. So yeah, so we've got 16 tied to a 32nd, and then what's the second dot always mean? You gotta remember.
Isn't it a quarter of the first original note?
Yeah, a quarter of the first. I think it's easier to honestly to think of it. That's right, but it's easier to honestly think of it as half of the one you just did. So you half that, and you tie it, and then you half that again. So this is going to be the correct answer. I'm going to try to make it look nicer because I'm just feeling like aesthetic all of a sudden. So we have a 16th tied to a 32nd tied to a 64th. Some goofy looking stuff, but there we go. So that's the correct answer on that one. So we half whatever we have, and then we half that answer again. We tie all those together, and we've got ourselves the equivalent of whatever this double dotted thing is. Make sense? You should be able to do the rest of those now. Okay, let's see. So that's how that one works. You got 3 more to work on there. Then using the fewest possible notes along with ties where needed, write a single duration lasting the number of beats specified in each of the following cases. Include bar lines if more than one measure is needed. So there's a few things you gotta be aware of here. So they give us the example of we want 3.5 beats in cut time, or 2/2. Remember that slash thing is cut time. We want 3.5 beats. So we first have to, the first thing, the process here is everything, right? And you're going to hear me say that a lot about just about everything. But the process is everything. We got to figure out first what is 1 beat in cut time, and it's a half note, right? So 2 beats would be a whole note. So that's got 2 beats. We still need a beat and a half. And we're trying to do it as few notes as possible. And so to get an extra beat and a half in 2/2 cut time, we need a dotted half note. And then we tie those together, and that note right there in cut time is worth 3.5 beats. All right, I'm going to pick one of the ones they've got for us here, and we're going to do it together. How about 12/8? Let's do that. That seems complicated. And we need 5 1/3 beats. Let's try to do this one together. So 12/8, 5 1/3 beats. The first thing I'm going to do is figure out what gets 1 beat in 12/8. So what does get 1 beat in 12/8? Kind of a tricky question.
Dotted quarter note?
Yes, a dotted quarter note. So 1 beat in 12/8 is a dotted quarter note. It's not an eighth note, remember? Because eighth notes, we actually feel the beat in this dotted quarter note. The eighth note is the division of the beat. And 3 of them in each one. So yeah, the first thing to figure out is to know that. It's compound meter, so dotted quarter note. So how many dotted quarter notes can I fit in one measure?
4.
4, right? So, and I could just write, let's see. Yeah, so that looks like this. Sorry, it's kind of crammed. But I can write that in fewer notes, can't I? All right, so I could start out, I just start adding them together as best I can. 2 dotted quarter notes actually equals a dotted half note. If you do the math on that, you'll figure that out real quick. All right, I could do that. That's already smaller. Remember, this is one measure. But, and we're going for 4 right now. But I could go even one more, and in fact, a dotted whole note gets the job done. Seems weird, but there we are. All right, so dotted whole note, it's worth 4 beats in 12/8. So I've got 4, and remembering that 1 beat is this, I need 5 1/3 beat. It's fractions, man, good stuff. So I need 1 more to get 5. That's easy. There's 1. In fact, let me go ahead and tie those. So I got 5 beats. How do I get 1/3 of a beat? What's 1/3 of a beat in 12/8?
An eighth note?
Yeah, an eighth note. That's it. Because we divide, remember the 8 talks about the division, an eighth note. And so this is the correct answer. That's as small as I can get that. Now, you might look at this and go, well, can't I just do a half note instead of the dotted quarter plus an eighth? Kind of. The issue is that, I mean, I would probably count that correct because you're thinking on the next level of like, okay, but you know, that equals that. Sort of. The problem is we really do need to divide the beats and be able to visually see that there's 4 beats per measure and that they're divided. And so we usually try to visually still continue to divide so that we don't have really half notes hanging out by themselves in 12/8. We have dotted quarters. So this is probably the real correct answer. This might also kind of work. It depends on how you think about it. That one's a little complicated that way. But this is what I think is the true correct answer. All right, and then 5, just to go over one of these really quickly, how to do this. Write an appropriate meter signature for each of the following examples. So let me quickly jot one down. 3/2. This is just going to take some additive math. We're going to have to sort of add up what we got and use our visual cues. Oh, crap, I kind of 6. Yeah, that's all right. To give us, I'm missing one, but to give us the correct answer here, we're just going to have to use some different visual cues. I marked down one of them. It's missing the last measure, but it shouldn't really matter. So, you know, we can start counting how many of something are in a bar. And in this case, looking at all, there's 4 of the measures, but 3 of the measures that I wrote down. Probably the easiest one to figure out is this one right here, this last one. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarter notes, right? And so that's already kind of showing me, all right, that probably is limiting it to certain types of things. In fact, I already know for sure there's going to be a 6 up here, probably, but not completely. It could be, and you have to look back at that grid and kind of see what else could this be. Well, it could also be a 3. So I could just sort of test out, does this look like 3/2? Because this implies it could be 3/2, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and, if I divide it that way. But this measure right here is divided, you know, into 2 halves in the measure, and we don't do that with 3/2. We do 3 half notes instead of 2 dotted half notes in 3/2. So that's not gonna, so 3/2 is not correct. I could try the different ones that work. So instead, I look at 3 half notes and I go, well, that kind of implies then 6/4. So that still works for this. That works for this, 1 and 2 and 3 and, or sorry, 1 and 2 and then this is 1 and 2 and this is the measure that really gives it away, that it's 6/4. Does that make sense? So you've got to look at multiple measures and not just pick one and then go, okay, it's this. Well, you need more context clue than that. to make it go. So that's the correct answer on that one. Well, my kids are starting to scream at each other, so it must be the end of class time. Any
Which number was that?
that was number 5, like the third one down, I think. Let me find it. I'll pull it up on the screen here.
Can you put your notes up one more time, please?
Sure. So it's this one right here. Yeah, it's the exercise 5, the third one. I just left off the last measure. Now, again, this one, it sort of gives you context too. The one I left off, notice that it's like missing, it's half of a measure here. So it's like left out. It's trying to confuse you with that last bar. But it's also showing you there's a space there, that there's a note missing. It's just an incomplete measure. So be careful that, again, this is the context that started pushing me in the right direction. And then this is the one that got me the right answer. And I'll show you that again, which is right here. There you go. Yeah, so the context, start to get it here, really get it here. And then that's the correct answer is 6-4. 1 and a 2 and a. And we count that kind of like we count 6-8 in this case. Yep. All right, I think we've hit the end here. Any last second questions or anything? Good luck with the homework. If you have trouble, write me. I'll help you out. If anybody wants to meet in person, just write me and we'll set it up. Today and tomorrow are great. So let's do it if you need it. Otherwise, I'll see you in class on Wednesday. Thanks, folks.